Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, episode 68.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers and enthusiasts who are looking to take their games to new heights. Dedicated to custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to bringing you useful information on custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice techniques to take your game to new heights. I've been looking forward to doing this interview with Dr. Chris Riddoch from Stockholm, Sweden, since I first heard that he was writing a new book about improving sports performance. This book was published about 2 weeks ago. It's titled Winning at Sport. I immediately read it, and it certainly didn't disappoint me. I love this phrase that Chris has on his website, and I believe it captures his approach to learning and writing and sharing information with people to help them perform their best. And here's the quote: "My aim is to show you the scientific route to being the best player you can be. No myths, no opinions, no untested theories. Just the scientific truth about how to be a winner." So enjoy this interview, I know I certainly did, with Chris Riddoch. Hello, this is Tony Wright with the Golf Improvement Podcast. It's my real pleasure today to talk with Dr. Chris Riddoch, a sports scientist who previously wrote two great golf improvement books, Expert Putting and The Golf Swing. He has a PhD in sports physiology. He's in Stockholm, Sweden. And about a year or so, I contacted him about doing a podcast. He said he was working on a new book, which just got published, Winning at Sport. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Chris, welcome, and thank you for doing this.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, and we got the bugs out of the phone thing, I hope, right now. So we had a little problem there in the beginning. You know how it goes.
The bugs are always there, but we'll see.
There you go. Well, if you would, please start at the beginning here and talk a little bit about your background in sports performance improvement, but also what led you to write Winning at Sport.
Yeah, sure. Well, I started my career as a physical education teacher. I originally trained in sport to teach kids how to play sport. And, of course, there was a big emphasis on motor skill, because that's what kids need, both for health, and for sport.
Yeah.
So that was my initial training. And because I was a sports player, I got into coaching children, and I particularly coached badminton at that time, and I got to coach some elite children in the badminton world. And then later, I got into the university world as a lecturer, and I got involved with, because I was an exercise physiologist in those days, I got into sort of fitness and coaching fitness, and got involved with some international rugby teams and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I also got involved in coaching coaches, into coach education. So it's been a long career, if you like, and starting with kids and finishing with adults.
Yeah, and I didn't mention you've had like a 30-plus year career, isn't that right? When you get to the long haul, right?
Yeah, I retired from academia just a couple of years ago to write books, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've got a long experience, yeah. So that's shorthand for I'm old.
Now, a little bit then, too, about winning at sport. I know you talk about that in the intro to the book, but sort of what got you going about doing this particular book?
Well, I think it's over the years, I realized that nearly all players underperform, that they never achieve what they're fully capable of achieving. I know I underperformed when I played, and when I was coaching, I could see players underperforming, gauged against their athleticism and their talent. And it appeared to me that most players don't know how to be the best player they can be. And in particular, they don't know how to produce their best play when they're under pressure. And I think it's because they have gaps in their knowledge. They don't know some crucial things, and they fill those gaps with all sorts of myths and untested theories and opinions and tips and gimmicks and that sort of thing. So I think there's a way that players can improve, not by necessarily working harder or adding yet more things, but by exchanging some of the stuff they do that doesn't work for stuff that we know does work.
Yeah, and you mention a lot in your book about trying to, some of the things, even though there's a lot of science in it, they're simple things, right? That you discuss and cover in the book. So, and it's a book, it's just as much, I think, it's hard for me to tell if it's more for players themselves or in some ways for coaches to help people. It's obviously both.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very valuable book for coaches. My personal view is that many sports, and golf's one of the worst, I think, is that they've made the sport or the skill too complicated. It's one thing to produce good science, complicated science, difficult science, and it's interesting, and I love it. And scientists love it, but, that difficult science has got down to the playing level without translation. And, many players in many sports, golfers, more than most, are going around with a head buzzing full of pseudo-scientific stuff that they don't need.
Yeah. Well, you started a journey, I guess, about 2 years ago in writing this, and, what is it? There's like 200 references in your book, so you don't go at this kind of half-hearted. Talk a little bit about your process. I guess in writing any of the books that you do, I assume you have sort of a kind of a similar process for anything, but what you end up doing to create, to kind of get to the final product.
Well, what I do is I follow a basic scientific process which scientists all over the world in all disciplines use. It's called a systematic review. I won't bore you with the details, but it's the most rigorous form of research, if you like. You collect all the high-quality evidence there is on a topic, for example, playing sport under pressure, and you collect the best evidence, the evidence that's been thoroughly tested, and you might end up with a handful or dozens or even hundreds of papers. We're not basing what we're saying on just one study.
Yeah.
We're synthesizing all the best research and making the story out of that. So there's no rubbish in there. There's no sort of magazine articles. It's all published, peer-reviewed by other scientists, and it's a solid body of evidence about what we know works. And then once I've done that, I write the scientific story, and I write it in scientific language that I understand, but it's boring for everybody else. So the final step is to take all the difficult stuff out. I take out all the scientific jargon, or if I leave it in, I explain it. I take out the difficult word, I take out the statistics, and I give examples. And you end up with a scientific story, but not written in, overly scientific language. It's more accessible.
Yeah. As I hear you describe that too, it seems to me that in some ways it can be a little bit more difficult to do some of that. I mean, the easy part is because it's so easy to get all the information. But then the hard part is there's so much information, right? And kind of winnowing that down because of, you can Google and get 10 million things, right?
Yeah, I haven't Googled for evidence. I've only used scientific journals.
Okay.
So all the evidence I've used is from respected scientific journals.
In the fields of sports performance and golf and soccer and, well, excuse me, I got to say the right word, right? Football.
Oh, that's right.
That's right. Well, there's a lot of great chapters, and we're not going to anywhere close talk about everything that's in the book. But one of the chapters in the book is called Practice with Your Animal, and I think it's excellent in terms of helping golfers. As you say, identify some of the principles. But there were two things, talk a little bit about that chapter, but in particular, there was one thing about beginners are like experts almost, and then old way, new way. Maybe talk about those two particular little, if you would, vignettes that are in that chapter.
Yeah, okay. Practice with your animal. It's a strange title, but it's to remind golfers and players that they're animals. They're not robots. A lot of coaching and a lot of coaching manuals, they're based on physics and mechanics, and that's great for robots. They have steel limbs and they have unidirectional, very precisely honed joints, and that works for them. We're not. We're more like rag dolls than robots. We're very floppy, and there's a reason for that. We're designed. Evolution has designed us to be able to move our limbs in many directions, and this is our control system. When we swing a golf club, we need all this looseness and this flexibility to control the club head. If we'd only allow the body to do it, the body's very good at doing it. It's evolved to do it. And, coaching sometimes tries to force it out of us by straitjacketing us into somebody's vision of the perfect swing in all its minute detail, and that actually works against us. So that was the reason I got the word animal into the into the chapter. And then beginners against experts. Well, that's interesting because it flows on from that. There are two types of golfers whose movements vary a lot from swing to swing: beginners and experts. They both vary a lot, and that surprises many people. That the experts, their swing varies because we think of them like robots, but really they're not. So it's interesting to look at what's going on there. So for the beginners they can't control their movements. And so any variability, all this wild swinging, they have no idea what they're doing, and it's dysfunctional. It holds them back. They need to actually freeze up and become a little bit more robotic. And, this works. They get a bit of control over the club head, and they progress, and they become intermediate golfers. But, have you noticed how the world is full of intermediate golfers? With handicaps between about 8 and 18. They'd love to be scratch golfers, but they get stuck. And I think they make a real mistake. Intermediate golfers know that by eradicating extraneous movements, they've improved. So they think that freezing themselves up more and more will take them from intermediate to expert, and that doesn't happen. They need to sort of free themselves up a little bit and become looser in their swing, because that, as I say, is our evolutionary movement control system. We see it in particular in putting. The way even the professionals putt, it's very robotic, very stiff. They've taken out all the what we used to call feel from putting, and players of all levels above beginner need to allow their swing to be a little bit variable, a little bit loose. It's not going to harm you. And we hold ourselves back when we try to create a perfect swing that perfectly repeats every time, because we're stifling the very thing that, we need to control the club head. So that was the story about beginners and experts. They both vary a lot, but for different reasons. And then the old way, new way. Well, I suppose the best way to look at this is that we're not suggesting that we can swing any way we want, and there's no need for coaching. Quite the opposite. All skills have a handful of real movement fundamentals that you must achieve, to be good at that skill. And when we practice, we need to focus on achieving these. Now, the important point is that there's a handful. And the golf swing has 4. Now, it's a handful, not a 300-page coaching manual's worth.
Yeah.
So, I have a coaching book, and a while back, just out of sheer interest and a boring evening in front of me, I counted how many technical details there were in that book, and it's a well-known book. And there are over 250 pages, and there are more than 1,000 technical things we need to achieve in the golf swing. And we only get just over a second to swing the club. So it's a route to madness in a way. It's several lifetimes' work to get anywhere near it. So the old way, new way is really attacking the fundamentals. We're not talking about small details of the swing. So when you find that you're not achieving a fundamental, like in the golf swing, it's you have to deliver the club head on plane. All golfers will know what that means. The old way, if you're not doing it, was to try to forget the old technique and replace it with a completely new technique. But there's a problem. The brain can't forget. The old technique will always be there, and it will always likely to come out. If you've got a swing that slices the ball out of bounds on the right, you will always have it. Now, you can fix it, but not by forgetting it, because, as I say, we can't forget it. The new way, the modern way of improving a technique is to modify and adapt the old way. So you practice both techniques and you feel the difference. And this will be quite a new thing in golf coaching.
It's something I never heard of before. I mean, it's a concept that, maybe it's been out there, and I'm sure it is because you found it, but it's fascinating. Yeah. Well,
it's the modern way that skills are taught, in gymnastics and tennis, many other sports, when you really need to change a technique. I mean, Tiger Woods has just had to change his technique because he's had back problems. Well, I don't know what technique he's used to make the changes, but the best way is to, as safely as you can, try the old way and the new way, feel the difference, and allow the old way to merge or meld into the new way.
Yeah.
So if you shank, if you're prone to shanking golf shots, it's wrong to try to forget it and try and learn a completely new technique. The most effective way is to actually try and shank, and then try the new technique that the coach has told you, and try one and then the other, and keep alternating between the two, and the body learns that what to avoid and what to do, and it's a more effective method.
Very, very interesting. Well, one of the big themes of your book is mindfulness. I think that's in many ways an overarching kind of a theme. Talk in a little bit, could talk for probably an hour on that, but some of the highlights of some of the things about mindfulness that sure. that really resonate with you as you look back in terms of writing the book.
Yeah, well, most people, I think, have heard of mindfulness, and it's creeping into sport, and it hasn't actually taken hold yet. But to me, as a sports scientist, it's hugely, hugely exciting, because especially for players who don't have the resources to have a performance team around them, your nutritionist, your psychologist, your fitness specialist, your physiotherapist. So it's a simple way of getting control of your brain when you compete. Now, the traditional way of dealing with this is to learn a whole raft of sports psychological skills. There are many skills we can learn, and they work. Many top sportsmen use psychologists, but it makes it a sort of a scary topic for many players, and they might not have the money, or they might not know a sports psychologist to teach them the techniques. So most players sort of turn away from psychological preparation, and they go back to what they know, training their bodies. But this is a real disaster in a way, because the brain controls every movement we make. So, it's not just about dealing with anxiety and stress. It's about making all the right movements in the golf swing. So we really must develop mental skills. And, if for people that are scared of sports psychology, mindfulness is equally effective. It's free. It doesn't demand a sports psychologist, and it doesn't take too much time. So if you have problems with anger management or pre-competition anxiety or lack of concentration at crucial times, learning these simple mindfulness skills. In fact, it's only one skill. That's the beauty of it. I think it's you could really boost your competitive performance.
I spend time doing something called Headspace. I don't know if you've heard of it, but one of the concepts in that is he calls the concept of noticing, right? Kind of simply noticing and accepting, right?
Oh, yeah.
Just simply noticing what you're doing, which, almost all of us, it's very easy to not do that and kind of get locked into being frustrated, right? So. Yeah,
that's a part of the mindfulness skill. But to me, the most exciting thing is that it's extremely common sense. If you take the traditional psychological skills route, these involve fighting your negative thoughts. You try to control them. Whenever you get a negative thought, you try to control it by thinking a positive thought. So you end up because we have 60,000 thoughts a day, most of which are negative. Evolution has made it that way. We end up with this endless stream of negativity when we compete. And, to try and replace all that with good thoughts, it's a struggle that we can never win. And so we end up fighting ourselves more than we fight our opponent. So mindfulness is a much simpler solution to me anyway, a common sense approach. You just let the thoughts go. You don't fight them, you just release them. You accept that that's the way the human brain works, and you compete alongside the negative thoughts. They come and go in the background.
Yeah. You
don't engage with them. And you can learn these skills in 10, 15, 20 minutes a day.
Yeah, awesome stuff. Next thing I want to talk about, you had a pretty large section in the book on teams, and some of the important principles of teams. And I thought it was excellent. So I'm going to kind of pose this almost as an example. Say you're a coach of a university golf team. What are some of the most important things based on your research that maybe processes or strategies or whatever you want to call them that you'd put in place to try to help your team to be successful?
Right. The
big question too, right? Could be a large.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting question because there are different types of teams. There are teams where players are just a bunch of individuals and they all compete individually, and golf can be like that, or it can be where they have to cooperate, and golf can be like that, in foursomes and four balls. And there are teams like football teams or basketball teams which are dynamic and moving, and there are patterns of play. So golf, it comes it's more towards the individual side of things, or the end of the spectrum, than the dynamic team end of the spectrum. So I would treat the team as a bunch of individuals to start with. And go and make sure that the players are maximizing their own individual performances before I introduce lots of stuff about communication and hierarchies and that sort of thing. So I think actually a golf team is a fairly simple thing. That you can take an extreme example of, for example, the Ryder Cup, where there's an awful lot of stuff spoken about how they meld as a team and motivate each other. I mean, a lot of what is written and spoken has absolutely no basis in science.
Yeah, right.
They get motivational speakers. I believe at one of the Ryder Cups recently, Sir Alex Ferguson, the famous golf coach, came and gave them a motivational talk. I mean, it may have a small effect, but there are much more substantial things you can do with teams. It's a very difficult thing to measure teamwork and team spirit, but there are ways of doing it, and they do it in business. How does a team work in a factory or an office? And people are starting to translate that research into sports, but it's very much at the beginning stages. But so right now, the state of the science is that we don't know what gets a team to gel in the individual sports like golf. So I would actually focus mostly on the players' individual performances.
That's a fascinating, and to say that the science really doesn't necessarily tell us. I that's an important statement, right? That just says, we know where we need to go, but we're not quite there yet. So maybe that's why some golf coaches might get frustrated from time to time, right?
Yeah, I mean, what makes a Ryder Cup team gel or a college golf team gel is, at this scientific point, purely a matter of opinion. And, coaches have all sorts of opinions, and every time a new coach is appointed, they change things because they think this works or that works, but they're really casting in the dark. It's an imprecise science, I'm afraid.
So maybe that also suggests then that somebody as a coach needs to be a little easy on themselves, because it's not all right. You kind of want to, I'm saying there that it's not, there's not a formula that you can necessarily apply. Yeah.
No, but there are basic things that let's say football teams do. I'm talking about English football, soccer teams. The language players use when they talk to each other, the attitude that players have to each other when somebody hits a bad shot or has a bad loss. There are lots and lots of simple little things that coaches have learned through experience work. To hold meetings where they stop the talkative players talking and encourage the quiet players to speak up a little bit, and just get players to feel comfortable. I mean, these are, maybe it's more of an art than a skill, and it may vary a lot from sport to sport. But there are lots of little things you can do, and I've covered, a lot of them in the book. It's up to each coach to say, to select which might work with their sport, with their team.
Yeah. Well, so now the book is published, but also, you are and we're a competitive golfer. So what, based on the last 2 years, have you put in place for yourself that you have seen, whether there may be a few things that have really made a difference in, your performance, your play, your fun, whatever you want to say in terms of your golf game?
Yeah, I don't play competitive golf anymore.
Not anymore,
I play for fun, but I still like to play well, and I still like to win. I think the thing that's had the most impact on me is to lose any fixation I had on detailed technique. All the hundreds of things that we are bombarded with, from magazines and coaching manuals and books, and to stop tinkering. The body when it moves through a golf swing, it hates tinkering. If you adjust the angle of your, right elbow, the body will automatically adjust something else to compensate. That's the way it works. So, when golfers say, I didn't play too well today, I'm off to the range to just change a few things, that does not work, I can assure you. The body is a dynamic system. It is not a machine. It's not a robot. So, to focus on simple movements, simple fundamentals in golf, driven by simple thoughts, and try and, unpack all the pseudo-scientific nonsense. Well, it's not all nonsense, but the pseudo-scientific stuff that we're bombarded with. Just ignore it all and get down to the really basic fundamentals of how the golf swing works. And as I say, there are only 4. Learn them and fix them, and focus your attention on those 4 things. Even 4 things is too much to think about in 1 second of a golf swing. So it's still a challenge. And I think the other thing is the mindful approach to competing. Don't care so much, don't try so hard, accept mistakes. It's a completely different way of looking at things, and it helps you keep the lid on your anger. It helps you focus on tactics rather than how you're swinging. So those two things: simplicity in the physical side, and the mindful approach on the mental side.
Yeah, interesting stuff. And like you said, the simple things. Well, this has been one of my favorite interviews. I definitely appreciate you doing this. Any final words for golfers that, you've said a lot of things already they can take away, but any kind of final tasks and suggestions for them to help them play just a little bit better, maybe, right?
Well, I guess the most interesting thing a golfer could do is maybe take a week, and during that week, if they practice, put the coaching manuals away, forget everything you know about technique, and just hit shots, relaxed shots.
So hit a draw, hit a cut, hit a little chip or something. Is that kind of what you're saying? Tell yourself to do a specific shot and just do it.
Yeah, just mix it up a little bit. Don't go hitting machine gun drives down the range as far as you can. Sort of, try and play a round of golf. Hit a drive, hit a wedge, hit a bunker shot, hit a gentle fade, hit a slow draw or whatever, thinking only about the shot. You forget everything about weight shift and body rotation and all that stuff. Just do it for a week and see what happens. I will, almost guarantee you will see no worse results than what you do when you think about technique. And you might see, I hope you will see, an improvement. Just don't try so hard. See the shot, hit it, and let your body do the work. Don't try and force your body to do things it doesn't want to do. And then when you're playing, again, don't ever think about how you're swinging. Even if you're playing badly, you can't fix it. You can only fix things on the driving range, but you see people rehearsing after a bad shot. They rehearse the swing and they exaggerate movements to try and do it differently next time. And, that is a recipe for disaster. So, you play with whatever form you have today. You don't try and make bad form into good form. It's just not possible. I
remember reading that Jack Nicklaus says if he was drawing it one day, he drew it. If he was cutting it, he cut it, and there you go, right? Well, you were going to say one more thing. I'm sorry I kind of cut you off, but go ahead.
No, not really. Just those two things. I mean, they're sort of designed to make golf simpler. It's simpler and more fun, and it also, by the way, makes you a better player. Yeah, and they're both aimed at cleansing your brain, because your brain is almost certainly contaminated. We play with a head full of stuff, and it's stuff we don't need, and it's stuff that harms our performance, and it's far more stuff than the brain can possibly cope with. And the route to improvement is to have a little spring cleaning in your brain.
Yeah, a little spring cleaning. Great ending. Chris, thanks again for today. I'll put links in.
It's a pleasure.
I'll put links in the show notes to your website where they can see all your books. Obviously, anybody that wants to buy any of the things you've written can get them on all the different versions of Amazon. But you've done a really neat job with this book. I think it's going to be valuable for many, many people. So thank you for doing that.
Well, it's been a real pleasure, and thank you. Taking your game to new heights. www.gameimprovementgolf.com.
I only put one link in the show notes, and that is to Chris's website. From there, you'll be able to find out more information about winning at sport, but also about his 2 other excellent golf improvement books. All of these are available from Amazon.com and other book dealers. Well, that's it for today. In 2 weeks, I get to have a lot more fun again with my first annual Christmas podcast with my great friend Mike McFadden, a 30-plus year teaching professional from Germany. Mike will talk about some of the things that he's learned in the past year about motor learning, some of the new things he's learned, and also how to apply this knowledge to help golfers play their best. See you in 2 weeks.
Game Improvement Golf, your source of information and inspiration to become an exceptional golfer now. www.gameimprovementgolf.com